Assalamu alaikum, program Perspectives, and I am your host Ghulam Nabi Morai. Viewers, we discuss in depth the subject from various perspectives. An intellectual, a historian, a writer, Syed Mohibullah Shah Sahab is with us. Shah Sahab, Assalamu alaikum. Shah Sahab, today our topic is clash of cultures. And how would you define the culture, and also what is the clash of cultures?
Thank you, Morai Sahab. Clash of cultures. Well, a clash of cultures, what we want to convey is that a clash of cultures is going on within Muslim society. And we'll talk about that. There is another clash of cultures, which on a larger world scale is going on. And that is called a clash of civilization.
But what is the culture, first of all?
We will come to it. We'll come to that.
Yes.
So there are two ways. There are two kinds of clashes going on in the world, but we will talk about one today, which is the clash of cultures. And this clash of cultures is taking place within the Muslim societies themselves. That is why it is important, we thought it is important to bring this to the notice of the viewers and the audience, to take note of it, that this clash is causing great harm to the Muslims and they are not able to advance in the world. As we know, there are 1/4 of the population of the world, and they control fabulous energy resources of the world. And yet, so many countries, but they are not able to show their strength or power or prosperity in the world because of this internal clash of cultures which is going on, and it is weakening them. So now let us see, we come to first to define what culture is, then we'll pick up this subject again, why this is a very important topic. Now, generally the culture is perceived to be something which relates to art and music and painting and drama and dances. That is right, but that is only one part of it. Culture is much wider. Culture relates to the way people live their lives, the entire spectrum of how people live their lives. How do they work? Where do they work? What laws and organizations they work under? What kind of work ethics is going on? What kind of laws affect their behavior? What kind of governments are there? What kind of customs, traditions are prevailing in that society? What is the role of individual in that society? Does society matter? All these things, these are values which define a culture in a particular society, whether it is one country or a community. And today what we are talking about is the prevailing culture in most of the Muslim countries. And our contention is that there is this clash of cultures which is going on, and it is harming the Muslim community as such, and they are weakening them. Now, as we said, that culture spans the whole behavior and pattern of life, how people live their lives. Now, who decided how to live their lives? That's a very important question. And if we look back at history, we will see, look at the subcontinent, look at Pakistan, for instance, or you look at many other Muslim countries, for instance. Historically, they used to be empires, kingdoms. They used to be conquerors, conquest, invasions, and they used to impose their culture on people. That's an important. The culture was not, the pattern of behavior was not something which people decided among themselves. It was imposed upon them. This conqueror came and he said, okay, this is the way you will behave. This is the kind of a government I will give you. This is the kind of laws I will have. Those laws, A, B, C, I will cancel. This is the position of individual, important or unimportant. So, this pattern of behavior or a culture was generally imposed by the conquerors, by the invaders, by the kings upon the people. This was not a culture which was developed by consensus of people. Now that is the culture which continued for centuries. And in that culture, there was no position of any individual or any importance. Now, this was the culture which prevailed, or a pattern of behavior which prevailed because it was imposed by force, by a conquerors or the invaders or whoever came to control over the territory or a particular people. Now, for a long time, this continued for centuries, and not just in Muslim world, it was there all over. It was in Europe, it was in other parts of Asia, Africa, wherever it was. And at that time, the individuals did not matter, for instance. Now, there were good times also, and there were some bad times also. There were good rulers also, and there were bad rulers also. I'll give two examples, for instance, of let us say, a culture which was flourishing, which was positive, which was inclusive, which was liberal, which was oriented to development and prosperity. And one of the examples from our perspective will be what we call the golden age of Islam. But 500 to 600 years from 8th century to about 13th century. These 500-600 years, the culture that prevailed was not a narrow or a conservative or reductionist kind of a culture, but a culture which was liberal, which was inclusive. It incorporated people of other faiths. It was an open culture which accepted good things from everywhere. And it developed, it prospered because they picked good things. It was not restricted that only the Muslims would contribute and the non-Muslims would not. It was not like that. That the golden age of Islam attracted people of, knowledge, skills, science, medicines, technology, from everywhere, from mathematics, from China, from India, from Europe, from everywhere. Non-Muslims, Muslims, everyone contributed and it flourished. That culture lasted for about, as I said, 500-600 years, and it brought prosperity and power to it was the Abbasid rule. So it from Baghdad, but that culture continued for the long time. But 13th century, a tragic event happened, which was Halaku's destruction of Baghdad. That kind of a culture went down, let us say. And subsequent to that, after this defeat, it created a negative culture of being very restrictive. And then the role of the ruler and the clergy, the religious leaders, they exercised large control over the behavior, and they dictated the culture. that this is correct, this is not correct, this is right, this is not wrong. Whereas in the golden age of Islam, as the history tells us, most people, Muslims, non-Muslims, they worked together, and each contributed, to the welfare and prosperity. Not, but that changed. That became very restrictive kind of a culture. And there's an example, as I said, on the other side of what kind of a culture was prevailing afterwards, when the individual had no position, not only an individual, but even people in, let's say, mid-level or whoever, had no position whatsoever. I mean, they did not matter in the whole scheme of things. This was the time when things had started to move in favor of Europe, and as I said, the decline of Muslims in the 13th century. This was a report from an ambassador, Maximilian I. He was the Holy Roman Emperor, Euripus. And they had an ambassador to the Turkish Sultan. It was very interesting. So there's this ambassador sent a report to Maximilian I, the Holy Roman Emperor, about how the Sultan and the court and the Darbar is conducted. He said, nobody matters. The Sultan is all-powerful in everything. The rest are like slaves. Nobody has any position, any right, whether it is ministers, whether it is amirs, whether ordinary people do not matter. This was the absolutism. There was the golden age when there was a diversity, inclusiveness, and prosperity. Now it's changed because of after that defeat and all. Now it became very restrictive, very narrow. And here is an example, nobody mattered. And I'll give one or two other examples as we move into the second session.
Let's take a break. Welcome back. Shah Sahab, you told about the prevailing culture during the pre-modern times. Okay. Now, how would you explain to our viewers the main features of that culture?
Okay. So we have been trying to explain one thing. Again, I think it's important to underline this fact. One, that culture relates to the whole human behavior. And two, that in the medieval times, culture was imposed by the rulers, by the conquerors, by the invaders. Culture was not developed by a consensus of the people, of society. Culture meaning how people behave, laws, rules, government, customs, traditions. These were imposed by the ruler. Okay, this is your culture now. Another ruler comes, this is yours. So this was the pattern in the Muslim world, in the non-Muslim world, everywhere in the world. Now we are coming to a time when that culture is changing. And we will see that this change is taking place not in the Muslim world, but in the European world. And then it is coming back into the affecting the Muslim world, because the world is interconnected. Okay, so now, as he said, what are the main features of this pre-modern culture? It was everywhere. Muslim world, non-Muslim, Europeans, Asians, wherever, because it was imposed by the rulers. Now, for instance, in that culture, there was no concept of society. That there is a society, collection of people, which has its own social organization, and it plays an important role in the relationship among people. That culture did not recognize the importance of society. It was the ruler and whatever was the ruling establishment. So that was one feature. The second was it did not recognize the individual, that human beings, that individuals do they have any right? In that world, they did not even have right to their life. Forget any other right to development or to dignity or etc., etc. They did not have right to their own life, which can be taken away by the rulers. It was a difficult autocratic world. 2. 3, it did not believe in the equality and equal treatment of women. That was the other feature, that the position of women was not recognized as equal. 4th, it did not give importance to knowledge or a new knowledge. It was assumed that knowledge is given, that it cannot be increased, it cannot be expanded, it cannot be added. It is given and you remember and you abide by it. So, reason and science did not have much value in that world. That's the 4th feature. 5th was, it did not think, as we said earlier, since the society as a group of people did not matter, since the individual did not have any right even to life, did not matter, and therefore the rulers were not accountable to anyone, neither to individuals, not to society, not to any organization. That was the other feature. And the 5th was that the concept of development, upgrading people in their standard of living, that did not exist. Government worked to increase the prosperity and wealth of the ruler, not of society, not of individuals who did not matter. Okay, so let me repeat simply for the viewers. So the features, and we'll then talk about it. The features were, 1, in that society, that culture did not recognize the society, that it's a separate institution other than the government and needs to be recognized. No importance. It did not recognize the individual or importance of individual life and had no rights, not even to life. 3, it did not recognize the equality in gender, equality of women and equal treatment. 4, it did not believe that knowledge can be incremental, that it can expand, that it can be added, and the science is an important factor in adding to the knowledge. It was thought, no, knowledge is given and you have to work within that. 5th, that the ruler was not accountable to anybody, neither to any law, not to any society, not to any individuals. And 5th, 6th, that there was no concept of development or upgrading the lives of human beings. Government was not responsible, society was not responsible, nobody was. Individual, if he or she were lucky, so they could do whatever they can for themselves and prosper. But the concept that whole country or a community should develop and that government or the ruler is responsible, that concept did not exist. The result was that in that medieval world, pre-modern, it took 1,000 years 1,000 years for, let us say, whatever the world at that time was, and the concept of GDP, that it took 1,000 years in that time for the GDP of the world to double. Okay? If it was 1 million, it became 2 million, for instance, in 1,000 years. What is happening now? The world GDP is doubling in every 50 years. So this is how the world has changed. In the pre-modern, in medieval times, it took 1,000 years for world GDP to double. Today, it takes 50 years for the world GDP to double because new knowledge will come, how the culture has changed. So, as you were asking, these are the main features of this culture. And what it did was, this, as I said, the result of that was there was no development and there was, let us say, an antipathy to new knowledge, opposition to new knowledge. Any new ideas, science, reason, or new inventions, there was resistance to it. Now, there is an interesting example which is often quoted as one of the reasons for which contributed to the decline of the Muslim society, because they did not accept that the knowledge can be created, new inventions, science and technology can create, which will help human beings and society. You see, in the latter part of 15th century, I think about 1460s or something, about 1467 or so, printing press was invented in Germany. Now, printing press, as we all know, can quickly reproduce papers, books, and the literature can be very quickly multiplied, and it can spread to many other people, the knowledge. So that was a big vehicle to spread the knowledge to a lot of people. However, when this information was brought by some people to the Turkish Sultan, that let us have printing press and we can also print books and literature and distribute it to people. There was a strike by katibs, people who do the writing in manuscripts. They all gathered together, thousands of them.
Ulamas.
Huh?
Ulamas also.
No, also they went, then they got support from ulama. Yeah, how come this is a kafir has brought an infidel, this is anti-Islamic thing, and it should not be allowed. And the Sultan, on request from these katibs, those who would write manually, and the ulama who were supporting them, he decreed that anyone who uses printing press in Turkey is liable to death punishment. So this is how a new culture which was developing was banished, was prevented from spreading and of improving the lives of people, and the decline of the Muslim world and the Muslim culture became because a new culture was rising, culture of development, and they were the pre-modern culture, which was a culture of non-development. But now we will talk about how this new culture of development became so powerful and the Muslim societies were colonized.
Let's take a break. Welcome back. Shah Sahab very well explained pre-modern culture. Okay, the main features of pre-modern culture. Now, what are the features of modern culture?
Okay. Now, since we are talking about the clash of cultures, here comes now the main question as you asked. We talked what were the pre-modern culture, and now we will talk about the modern culture and how there is a clash. Because in some societies there is no clash. That is also very important. In Europe, for instance, in America, for instance, in Japan, for instance, in China, for instance, in many other countries, they have resolved this conflict. There is no conflict, there is no clash. But in Muslim societies, that conflict and the clash still exists because they have not resolved this issue. How pre-modern culture transforms into the modern culture, there has been resistance. And this is what we wanted to point out, that for Muslim societies, not just Pakistan, but in other countries, they have to resolve this issue. This conflict between two cultures is causing them harm and weakness. Okay, so we'll start with what are the main features of this modern culture. We gave one example as we're concluding the second part of the invention of the printing press, and then there were some people whose rozgar, whose livelihood was being affected. Instead of adopting that culture of development, they used religion to prevent it. They got the ulama to give it a decree that this is un-Islamic. Now, this is the crux of the matter. In Muslim societies, adopting new culture of development, new culture where science and technologies play important part in order to upgrade the life and living standards of people, generally that door is being closed because of these fatwas that these inventions or these developments are not Islamic. Big part of that has been in Muslim societies the same example as in the printing press. And so that is one feature that of the modern, that science and technologies is an important part of modern culture. In the pre-modern, we saw there was no, this thing did not exist. Knowledge was taken to be fixed, given, and you have to be within that knowledge. Now, this new culture says the knowledge is not fixed. Knowledge can expand, knowledge can increase, new things can be added, new inventions can come, new discoveries can come. But then some, as in the printing, like in the printing press, this was being prevented to benefit the Muslim societies by both, by the rulers and also the religious clergy. They were, let us say, misusing the name in order to, keep their power, keep their control, and therefore the Muslim societies or the people in that world, Muslim world, they were not benefiting because the door to science and technology and new inventions and the new sources of wealth that were being created, that door was being closed. And there were two chowkidars standing at the door, the ruler and the religious clergy, and saying, okay, this door is blocked, you cannot go there. So that was one new feature for new culture, but it was, Muslims were not benefiting from it. Second, in the modern culture, individual has the central place, human being. That the system, it believed that the systems exist for the well-being of human beings. Your laws, your governments, your work ethics, your customs, your traditions, they should be in a way contributing to helping that individual, to the well-being of that individual, to his or her welfare, well-being, rights, dignity, economic well-being, social well-being, political well-being. So individual has a central place in the modern culture. As we were talking of the pre-modern, individual had no place. Society had no place. Here, individual has a central place. Knowledge, science, technology has a central place. Third feature, if individual is the central and the systems work for the well-being of individuals, then the government should also work for the welfare of the individual. Otherwise, it has no reason to exist. In the pre-modern culture, the rulers, the government existed for the well-being of the rulers, to contribute wealth to them and power to them. Rest of the society did not matter. As I was quoting that letter of the ambassador of
But
the
your definition is befitting to the present Pakistan circumstances.
Well-
Today, the system is for the rulers, not for
For-
the people of Pakistan.
so we talk.
We are still in the pre-modern days.
Well, wait.
We have not.
I want people, I want our viewers to make a judgment. We want to place the facts, and then people can make a judgment whether we are in the pre-modern culture or we are in the modern culture.
We are still in the pre-modern, or we have developed. Yes.
We want to lay all the facts before them. Here are the features of the pre-modern culture. Here are the features of the modern culture. Those who have adopted this culture have prospered, have become powerful. And we'll talk about that. Those who are still stuck up in the medieval culture have been weak and they have been colonized. They have been colonized by this modern culture. That this is, and as we said, this is a clash of cultures between Muslim societies. As I said, in many non-Muslim societies, Europeans, Americans, Japanese, Chinese, and others, they have resolved this conflict and there is no clash because they have accepted the main features of the modern culture. The main features are these: that knowledge is not fixed, knowledge can expand, and science and technology and discoveries and inventions, they contribute to expansion of knowledge and they contribute to the prosperity of people. They accept it. Muslim societies still do not accept the role of science, technology, inventions, and discoveries.
And that is why Muslims, the majority, actual
See,
majority
okay.
of Muslim countries or Muslim nations, they fall in that pre-modern
Okay, so this
stage and are not
this-
converting to the
Okay,
development.
this is why our purpose was to provide facts to our viewers so that they can make a judgment. And then, same thing, if individual human being is the center of all systems, economic systems, political systems, then in the political systems, the government should exist and work for the well-being of the people. Otherwise, it has no right to rule. So people elect or choose the government, and people have the right to remove the government. That is the other feature of this. And the third feature of the modern culture was to say that religion is a sacred thing. Politics is dirty in many ways. Politics is competition. Politics and search for power. Religion should not be used as a tool for getting power, because in that you are making a religion bringing it into a political controversy. So the modern culture has these four features. One, the knowledge is not fixed. Science, technology, discoveries, inventions, they contribute to the knowledge. Accept that fact. This is the modern culture. If Muslim societies, some accept, some do not. Those do not, they are in the pre-modern, the medieval
Those
world.
who accept, they have accepted partially.
Partially.
Fully.
Second,
There are, of course, Malaysia is an example. Indonesia is also.
Turkey, and they have some partially. They have, and the result is obvious. They are ahead of Pakistan, for instance. Okay, so in that way, if we follow, if the Muslim societies accept the culture which is developed by people who developed this, not the conquerors, not the invaders, but this new culture that individual human beings are the center, that their welfare and well-being is the purpose of government. This culture was developed by people themselves, by reformers, thinkers, educationists. They developed this culture, whereas the pre-modern culture was imposed by conquerors, by invaders, by the rulers, who only thought of their own interest, not of the people. So the new culture is a culture which is developed by consensus among people themselves, and it works for their well-being. The Muslim societies, if they move from pre-modern to this modern culture, which is working for the well-being of the people, then their societies and their people will prosper and become powerful. But if they remain in the medieval and the pre-modern culture, then they would remain weak, dependent, be either colonized or controlled by the societies and countries which have modern culture.
Thank you, Shah Sahab. Khuda Hafiz.